Hi, everyone. You are listening to Radio Cherry Bombe, and I'm your host, Carrie Diamond, coming to you from Cherry Bombe HQ in Manhattan. Today's guest is Cheetie Kumar, self-taught chef, rock and roller, and restaurant industry champion. To know Cheetie is to love her, as you're about to find out. She and her husband, Paul, are the owners of Ajja, a restaurant in Raleigh, North Carolina that celebrates the bold, beautiful flavors she loves. Ajja means come over in Hindi and Urdu, as Cheetie explains, and it's the perfect word to describe their buzzy neighborhood spot. Cheetie is also vice president and a board member of the Independent Restaurant Coalition, which represents indie operators across the country. Cheetie and the IRC are fighting to keep restaurants around the country alive and thriving. Yes, a cause we can all get behind. Tune in to learn about her childhood in the Bronx, how life on the road with Cheetie's band led to her becoming a chef, and what she means by the stupidity of ambition. Our chat was recorded during my visit to Raleigh. Great food town. Stay tuned for Cheetie Kumar. Next up on our Summer Tastemaker Tour, presented by the Visa Dining Collection by Open Table and Visa, is Austin, Texas. We're headed to the gorgeous Commodore Perry Estate on Friday, June 27th for an afternoon of great food, connection, and conversation. We'll be joined by special guests Sarah Hurd, Tracy Malachek Ezekiel, Amanda Turner, and Ale Corey, some of the most exciting culinary talents in Texas right now. As always, there'll be delicious bites, a panel chat, and plenty of time to connect with fellow Bomb Squad members. Access is available for those with eligible Visa credit cards. Terms and conditions apply. Visit cherrybomb.com for tickets and to learn more. We'd love to see you this summer in Austin. Now, let's check in with today's guest. Cheetie Kumar, welcome to Radio Cherry Bombe.
So glad to be here.
I was so excited to be able to eat at Ajja last night. Thank you for being open on Sundays.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I begrudgingly knew we had to do. It's in a neighborhood and there's nowhere to eat on Sundays.
Learned a lot about you because we hung out last night at the counter. I had absolutely no idea you were a native New Yorker.
Yeah.
You are so associated with the South and North Carolina. You've lost a bit of your
Oh, yeah. Well, it's
New
been
York.
a long time.
Your New York accent over the years.
As soon as I get in the back of a cab, though, it comes right back.
Comes right back. That's good to know. But one thing I don't know about you is how you became a chef.
Well, long, meandering process. I learned to cook when I was a kid. I was always kind of into food, and we lived in India until I was 8.5. And I was always kind of in the kitchen. It's cliche. You know, my grandma lived with us, and I just kind of gravitated towards the kitchen, getting treats and whatnot, and burning my hands at a very young age. Moved to America. My mom started working, and we lived in a very small apartment. So, yeah, I wasn't really allowed to go anywhere. We lived in the Bronx, and it wasn't very safe. You know, we lived in a busy street, and it wasn't really like anywhere you could go play.
Why did your parents come here? Do you know?
For work. They were both scientists, and they lived here in the 60s. Indians weren't really allowed to be residents of the country until 1965. So they were here as part of the first wave, and they had temporary visas, and they were both research biochemistry. My dad was very ambitious, but my mom had a lot of internal conflicts about staying in America. I think she felt like she was abandoning her family and her roots. So they decided to not renew their visa. She got pregnant with me. They moved back. And I think the reality dawned on my dad, especially, was very frustrated. So he was kind of always looking for a job. The whole time we were growing up, you know, we're like, we're moving back to America. And so he got a job, and it wasn't a great job, but it was a job. It was a foothold.
8 is a tough age.
Yeah.
So just moved to a new school, let alone a brand new country. Do you remember anything of it?
I remember everything.
You do?
Yeah, I have a lot of memories of my childhood and that time. And
were you excited moving, or?
I was really excited moving. I was not excited once we got here. You picture things, and the fantasy it's just such a big part of my childhood, the fantasy of America and the clean streets and, you know, the gleaming glass dishes of spaghetti and meatballs and, you know, all of the ads that I'd seen. And we moved to the Bronx, and it was not that. I was used to being, you know, well-adjusted and a kid with friends. And my dad was like well-connected. He was just kind of one of those guys, even though we weren't rich at all. Like we lived in a house that was part of the university housing or whatever, but we had a pretty we were comfortable. Yeah, we were comfortable. We were not comfortable when we moved to America. There's 3 years of uncertainty of, are we going to get a green card? We might have to go back. There was no money. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment, 3 kids, and language barriers and accents, and just, it's an awkward age anyway. But I've made a lot of friends. I've met people throughout my life, and so many people that I connect with, it turns out they moved at 8, and we have this interesting, I don't know, there's a thing. It's like, it's not astrological. You moved at 8, didn't you? You grew up pretty fast. At that age, you kind of know what's going on. You can tell your parents aren't in a good place. And so you kind of become very self-sufficient. And I think that's part of our generation anyway. We're kind of that way. Anyway, my mom, taught me to do some stuff in the kitchen so I'd get dinner started. But my sister was very like, I'm definitely going to be a doctor. My family's Indian, and, that generation of immigrants who are like our parents are very, get a degree, stability, security, very important. And I just never really had a calling for something that I thought would be a viable career. I studied psychology at UMass, but really I was like obsessed with music. And that was my go-to career right out of college, managing bands. I started my own company very young. Got bands signed, and then they all broke up.
Oh, no.
And then I had no company anymore.
Wait, go back a little.
Yeah.
So you must have been running around the city checking out bands because,
Well, I mean,
Manhattan was in your backyard and
yeah,
everybody.
but I wasn't really allowed. Yeah, I wasn't allowed to do that,
Okay.
in high school.
You were a good kid.
I snuck out for sure, but it's not like at 15, I wasn't going to the clubs. I wasn't that daring. I had to be home at a certain time. So I did what I could during those hours. So I spent a lot of time in the city.
So you get to college. That must have represented a lot of freedom for you.
It did. It really did. I could not wait. And it couldn't happen soon enough. So I really I worked at the radio station and the concert board. And, we used to go to Boston and New York to see shows. Amherst had Dinosaur Jr. and the Pixies would always play. And there was a lot going on. And, at that time, there were all these bands in the South, everything from hardcore to jangle pop. And I just kind of had this weird draw to it and visited North Carolina. And I just really loved it here. After my bands broke up, I decided to learn how to play guitar. And then we did that.
That's kind of late to learn how to play guitar.
Yeah, it was.
The whole time, did you think you wanted to be in bands?
I didn't dare. I mean, I had a guitar. Yes.
Even in college?
Even in college, no. This guy that I was friends with had this Jackson Flying V copy, and I borrowed it. And I mean, I had learned some chords when I was a kid on an acoustic, but I love Led Zeppelin and the Ramones. I don't want to play Joni Mitchell songs. I love Joni Mitchell now, but I didn't then, So, but my parents are not going to get me an electric guitar. But it was such a part of my internal fantasy life, I didn't dare think that. But, that's the thing about the 90s. It wasn't even cool to be proficient, So it was just, I learned a bunch of Stooges songs and MC5 and, I was trying to be as good as I could. But, we just, said, screw it. We bought a van at the state auction lot, a former prison van, and booked a tour and went on tour. And I learned how to play on tour.
What was the name of your band?
The Cherry Valance, named after the character in The Outsiders. And I was the only girl.
Diane Lane, right?
Diane Lane,
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Were you the lead singer also?
No, I didn't sing. I just played guitar.
Okay.
I was too shy to sing. Maybe still am.
Yeah. Did you write songs?
We kind of wrote collectively.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was really into guitar and effects and tone and recording. I just really loved studio stuff, and I managed the band and took care of the money and all of the things that go along with it.
We'll be right back with today's guest. Today's episode is presented by Vivian Culinary Books in Portland, Oregon. Located in the Alberta Arts District of the city, Vivian Culinary Books is owned by the creative and curious Robin Wheelwright, and it is truly a one-of-a-kind place. The shop features a curated mix of new and vintage titles, everything from the latest must-reads to rare gems. But it's not just books. Robin also carries table linens, aprons, pantry items from local makers, bottles of good wine, and unique consigned kitchenwares. Depending on the day, you might find some vintage copper pieces or that Le Creuset you've been hunting for. I know this because every time I've been to Vivian Culinary Books, I leave with some unique cookbooks and items from my kitchen I can't find anywhere else. The best part? Robin is building community in the most delicious way possible, hosting dinner party-style cooking classes at Vivian and welcoming authors on their cookbook tours. If you're in Portland, go visit. And if you're traveling to Portland this summer, put Vivian on your list of places to stop by. Tell Robin that Cherry Bomb sent you. Otherwise, browse online at vivianpdx.com and follow along on Instagram at Vivian Culinary Books. How were you feeding yourself at the time?
Well,
Were you cooking elaborate things?
I would cook on tour. To support being in a band, I was working in a restaurant. So I was started in the kitchen and I was like, well, I can't do both because neither of those things are going to make me money. So I started bartending. And for some reason, they let me keep my shifts when I came home on the weekends. But I would cater a little bit on the side. And when we were on tour, I'd be dying to like cook. And when I was home cooking and working in a restaurant, I'd be dying to go back out on tour. But we had a bin under our, like I built the bench and upholstered the bench in our van. We had no seat belts. And underneath we had bins, like, skinny versions of that. And they were filled with like spices and oil and vinegar and everything we'd need. So we'd go to supermarkets and we camped as much as we could. And
So you had like a hot plate, things like
well,
that.
yeah, I made good meals on George Foreman grills and a hot plate and Motel 6s, or more often than not, we were crashing with people. So, I'd always scope out. Like, it was always good if we stayed with somebody who there was a female in the vicinity. The kitchen was usable. And yeah, I mean, it was a Zen exercise and starvation and like being resourceful. Every meal was like a Chopped episode.
Your bandmates must have loved you.
They didn't admit it, but yeah.
I mean, a lot of the stories of bands touring is just hunger, food from gas stations and lots of fighting.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you get cranky, but I really tried. I read Fast Food Nation. So I was like, well, I can't eat fast food. The most I would, let myself do is like get a salad at Subway, no dressing, and then use all those vegetables to make real meals. And, I'd make lentils and
that's clever.
I would like, do fish on a fire and all kinds of stuff. Loved canned oysters. We'd have girl dinner before they knew what girl dinner was.
Not your typical band food.
No. And, when other bands toured with us, it was like, oh, I guess I'm cooking for 15 people now, 15 dudes who are just like, duh. Oh, wow, cool, thanks.
So what happened to Cherry Valance?
Paul and I left the Cherry Valance. It just wasn't.
So it was the Cherry Valance.
It was the Cherry Valance. Yeah. We were doing great. We toured in Spain and France and, we toured America. And I don't know, I just felt
Did you
like.
put out albums?
We did. We put out 2 records and an EP. Yeah.
Are you on Spotify?
We probably are. I think we were on YouTube. But Paul and I left. We wanted to do things that were a little bit more arty. And Cherry Valance was very like rock and roll, brash. And so we formed Birds of Avalon at that point. And Birds of Avalon is definitely on Spotify.
So everybody, whatever you're on, Spotify, YouTube Music, Apple Music.
Well,
Birds of Avalon.
And Birds of Avalon, like the later stuff is my favorite. Like our last record was in 2017. Well, how time flies. Anyway, so
okay.
this
Our last
is
cookbook was 2017. It was a good year for culture.
It was, yeah. So apparently there's an astrological come around with this year, 2017. I just listened to Channing Nicholas.
Okay. Do you get a check from Spotify?
We get BMI checks. Spotify, all digital streaming royalties go through Sound Exchange, I think it is. And those royalties are hilariously small. But
you do get a check every now and then.
Every quarter we get a BMI check.
All right, folks, go listen to Birds of Avalon and let's try to get Cheetie's checks to pop a little bit.
Yeah, if only we're on a TV soundtrack, that would be real money.
So you were a mixologist professionally more than a chef professionally.
Yes, and I would say I was a bartender. I could work a 4-deep bar for 10 hours, but I wasn't. I mean,
no one was calling you a mixologist?
No, I mean, I squeezed fruit for every drink. I never really took shortcuts, but I wasn't working in that kind of environment. I was more really interested in food. I read cookbooks on tour, like novels. I was just obsessed with food.
What were you reading?
Deborah Madison, Jack Pepin, Julia Child, Mother Joffrey, of course. Whatever, like we'd go to used bookstores and I'd always buy a couple of Kurt Vonnegut and go to the cookbook section and, get whatever. Everybody that had a cookbook, I would just learn techniques.
From reading. It's so interesting because now, we all watch videos to learn.
And I do too. I don't read cookbooks like I used to, but I would always just try to, okay, well, in India, you start, this is basically our mirepoix and this mirepoix. So I was like kind of forming diagrams in my mind of commonalities and seeing through lines and just learning about different people and how we're kind of the same.
Was your mom a good cook?
My mom was a phenomenal cook.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Food was really the language of her soul. I know that sounds hokey, but she was very intuitive and she never measured anything. You know, it's classic like brown mom, but she was a really great cook. And I studied how her food evolved. And she was also really open to new things, very harsh critic at restaurants. Both my parents were great cooks. Everybody in the family is a great cook. We're the kind of family who plans dinner at lunch and, you know, breakfast at dinner, that sort of thing. It was kind of like our saving grace when we moved to America. It was like the only joy, you know, like, oh, mom's making keema tonight, or like we're having rajma chawal or something. That was our glow in the day.
How did they feel about your music career?
Oh, I'm sure that they were very worried, but I was on my own and I don't know why, but they just kind of let me figure it out. I was a middle child and, you know, again, very kind of self-sufficient. And so they put their focus on my siblings, and I somehow maybe either made them feel like I was going to be okay, or they thought like, just give her some time. I also didn't really share how hard it was with them. I remember calling my mom from a payphone in Pensacola on my first tour, and I was like, I just really want to do this for a little while. I was very emotional, and she was really cool. She just kind of suspended her worry, and my dad went along with whatever she said. So it was okay. So Paul, my husband, while we were on tour, opened a music venue with a couple of friends because there were 3 people. Those 3 guys were all in different bands. And when people, our friends that we met on tour, would come to town, there's nowhere cool for them to play. So sometimes we'd put them in a, you know, house party or like a practice space show or whatever. And it was just so frustrating. And we just felt like there's so much music happening here. Chapel Hill has a Cat's Cradle. We got nothing, you know? So they opened a music venue that ended up being like a really important part of the scene. And all kinds of people came through, like the Shins played there, and Sharon Jones, and Tom Verlaine, and Richard Hell, Perubu, like so many bands came through. It was amazing.
And what was the name of it again?
Kings. And Kings is
Mhm.
still there. So the second, that building downtown, when downtown really had nothing, there were no real restaurants or anything going on, but that got torn down, built the convention center. And we were kind of looking for a new space. And at that point, I wanted to do something with food in that space, whatever space we found. And we found a second generation space that ended up being like massive. It was 10,000 square feet.
So
Venue
big.
upstairs, restaurant in the middle, and bar downstairs. And just the stupidity of ambition, you know, just like, yeah, we
I'm
can
gonna
do
use
this.
that term.
Yeah. So I ended up with a restaurant in the lease, and the space was there and it was way bigger. I wanted to have like a permanent food truck with 5 items on the menu.
So just going back a little bit, were you 2 done with touring? You wanted to have something permanent?
I mean, I think we were kind of getting tired of touring, and music, the way things happen in the music business changed too. Like everything was digital. And in the aughts, you made a record and you toured to support the record. The tour was like a commercial for the record, and the record was a commercial for your tour and all that. And then at some point, it felt very sudden. It didn't matter if you toured, and your record didn't matter if it was good. It was like it either caught online or it didn't. And you couldn't really support yourself by touring and being
The way you once could?
yeah. And it wasn't like, oh, that band was great, I'm going to go see them again. It just didn't matter. People just didn't go out
Yeah.
in the same way.
How extensively did you all tour? Did you
Oh,
tour
we
around
toured-
the world?
We toured all of North America, Canada, and Western Europe, but we didn't ever get to go to Japan or anything like that. We spent a lot of time in Spain and Belgium and France and Holland and, you know, Germany, Sweden, Norway. Yeah,
That's amazing.
it really was. You know, it was like at the time I was like, we're not successful. Like, you know, we're still kind of stuck in this spot. But now I look back and it was so incredible for us to be able to do that. And even though we were only in those cities for one night at a time, really got a sense of culture. It's like a Polaroid, you know, we got like a series of Polaroids of each town. And I could tell like, you know, Des Moines has not much going on, but there's that one pizza place that does weird weird stuff. I'm like, there's somebody cool there, or like, this is how, people in Bilbao eat. And the culture is very palpable. If you're walking into a place and you only have 2 hours, it's like the best limitation, right? Go. And you're walking, right? The van is parked. You can't move it. So here you are in like whatever part of town, and you get a very thorough sense because you're wide open. What else are you going to do? That's your only time to explore in the day. You've been sitting for 6 hours in a vehicle. So,
And one thing we didn't point out is there were not a lot of women in bands even back then.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, especially playing guitar. Bass guitar, yes, but not guitar, not lead guitar, and not singing. It's like, I can't tell you how many times it would be like, oh, are you the t-shirt girl? The daily, nightly thing with the sound guy. Oh, lead guitar, and they'd point to Paul, and it's like, screw you, buddy. But I'm glad that that's not really the case anymore. I see a lot more.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's
amazing now. I can't even believe it. And I think back to some of the bands I loved back in the 80s and the 90s. And, yes, there were bands like, the Bangles and the Go-Go's and Susie and the Banshees and Kim Deal. Thank God for Kim Deal.
Right.
But,
and Kelly Deal.
And Kelly Deal. Right. And Kelly. But it is not like today.
No. I love that, there's no hesitation. Like, why wouldn't a girl play guitar?
Even pop music right now. Like, I was never a huge fan of pop music, and I love all these performers now.
I know. Yeah, there's so much. There's good stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, can you even call Beyonce and Taylor and all those folks pop music anymore? It's just, what do these labels even mean today?
Right. I guess it's very highly produced. So that's kind of what I consider pop music, and it's popular, certainly.
It's popular.
But it's creative. It doesn't feel very cookie cutter. It doesn't feel like some guy was like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make you a star. It was quite a different time and very DIY. DIY is like a really big part of the aesthetic and a big part of who I am.
You've really persevered. Oh my gosh. All the different chapters of your life. It's amazing.
You just put one foot in front of the other. There's a lot of turmoil.
And you and Paul.
Yeah.
You've been together a long time.
Very long time. And we've seen a lot together, and it's astounding sometimes, I think we still choose to be together. After a while, you have to really make that decision periodically, more often than not, I think, and keep working on stuff. But I'm lucky. We found each other, and he's so positive, and he had such a quiet and peaceful childhood, and I did not. I think he brought out so much in me, and I'm very grateful for that. I don't think I would have played guitar in that way if it wasn't for him. He was just like, you're good, you should do it, really sweet.
You definitely seem like two sides of a coin.
Yeah. I think it works in that regard, for sure. He's the optimist, infuriatingly so, and I'm the infuriating pessimist. And somewhere in there, we kind of fill the glass.
Okay, so he opens
Kings in the first iteration, 5-7 years.
Kings 1.0.
Kings the first. Yeah, we looked for a new space, and we found the spot on Martin Street, and that's when Garland happened.
Did you wanted a restaurant?
I wanted a very small restaurant. I knew I didn't know how to do that, like a 3,000 square foot restaurant with a service team and a bar and 85 seats and a full kitchen. I liked too many things, and I didn't really, it was really just, thank God our lease was pretty cheap when we started, because I just threw things against the wall.
You literally threw the spaghetti at the wall.
I literally did. It was duck bogey, but, I was very determined to not have like an Indian restaurant. There were things I knew I didn't want to do. I knew I didn't want to source from a big box truck. I knew that the thing that I loved about Raleigh was the farmer's market. I knew that there were not any restaurants that were, there was a great divide, like Euro-based food that was expensive and well done and a great experience. And then there's a lot of ethnic diversity in this area, but all of those places were, quote, cheap eats, and the service wasn't that great, but the food could be, but it's not the same. You wouldn't consider having the same kind of meal. And those two experiences were very different. And I really felt like that gap needed to be bridged in Raleigh. So here we are. I do have a bartending experience. I was a server for about 6 months, world's worst server, but I knew how to cook, but I didn't call myself a chef for the first 4 or 5 years, I was just like, people would say chef, and I'm like, I'm not a chef. I did not feel like I earned that title. I was really just flying by the seat of my pants and just working like a dog. I know there's people who are starting, and you know what that's like. It's 80, 90 hours, first in, last out, no breaks. Like on my days off, I do the orders and inventory and, all of that stuff. No sleep, terror, and slow. We were so slow. I mean, my God.
So I had no idea you weren't a classically trained chef.
No.
I knew the music stuff. I didn't know. I don't know.
I'm just such
Stupidly
an
assumed
idiot.
you followed a traditional
I
path.
should have just taken guitar lessons and gone to cooking school. Like my life would have been so much better.
But would it?
I don't know. I think sometimes,
Yeah.
I can
some
see.
of us do things the hard way.
Yeah. I don't get a badge for doing that. It's so dumb. And now I get out in the world and I, cook all over the place, and I see chefs and I can immediately tell there is a beauty for self-taught, and self-taught people, but there's a refinement and a straight to the point clarity.
At the same time, I was at Ajja last night, and when I looked at the menu, I was like, I literally want everything on the menu. And that's not something I experience at every restaurant.
Well, that's very kind.
So you've tapped into something. It does not look like a menu that was built pleasing without pandering.
Right. And that is really one of the things that I held on to when we opened Garland. It was like, we're never going to have butter chicken on the menu. We're never going to have all of the things that you expect. It's just all really going to be about, this is delicious. And I hate borders. It has a lot to do with my family history. I think most of the modern borders are done by colonial powers. I just think all of those barriers are very artificial, and it doesn't really tell the true story of food. I'm doing a Middle Eastern restaurant. I'm not Middle Eastern, but I have a affinity for that history, and my family's history has been touched by all of that. So it's a fun exploration, and also I'm just having a great time learning about it and learning how to pronounce Arabic words, and I think it's pretty fun,
Well, I think you come at it respectfully.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you have Garland. How long is the run at Garland?
Garland opened in December of 2013, and we closed it in the end of August 2022. So 9 years. Good run, really good run. And, it was tied in a building with a music venue and a basement bar, and pandemic. If there was one place you really couldn't go to restaurants, but you really couldn't go to a music venue with no open windows, and you definitely couldn't go to a tiny basement bar. So it was also, I think a lot of people took that time to reevaluate and see what they wanted in their life. And, after my mom died in 2016, I just felt like everything was up in the air, and I really wanted to pick and choose what belonged to my life. There wasn't any room for anything. It was like, well, the venue has to not be in my life. And Paul, I think, liked it more than I did, but really it was just such a albatross all the time. And it's hard to make money in a 250-person venue. It was just really tied to that whole thing. And I think I was just looking for a new itch to scratch. And
did you know you wanted to stay in restaurants?
It just kind of worked out that way. We got the building that Ajja is in. I probably would have gotten out if we hadn't ended up with that building. Those two weren't connected, but it ended up being one after the other. It was supposed to be simultaneous, but that's just not how it worked out. So I was really open. I really tried to open myself up in 2021 when I was trying to make that decision. It rolled out, so I trusted in the process, and I don't know.
And you and Paul actually bought the building.
We did.
Which is remarkable.
It
Congratulations.
is. Thank you. I mean, the SBA helped us,
Yeah.
and a
Thank
great
you,
local
SBA.
bank. Yeah. We're very much in debt, but, it was another pandemic lesson because we were looking at losing everything. And after working that hard for 10 years and facing the possibility of having zero, less than zero, it was just like, well, there's a different way there's got to be a better way.
So 2013, you opened. That was very much kind of a boom time for Southern food. You had the rise of the Southern Foodways Alliance.
Yes.
You had all these chefs down south finally being recognized for what they were doing and where they were sourcing. You had all this incredible female chef talent in North Carolina. Were you so buried that you didn't have time to participate in this movement, so to speak? Or were you able to be part of that community in a bigger sense?
Not right away. I mean, I was obviously very inspired and influenced by, Ashley Christensen. And I didn't really know Katie for a while.
Katie Button.
But Andrea Rusing, I mean, those women were like, Ashley and I were friends before. But as chefs, they were terrifying to me. And I just couldn't understand how confident they were. And they just seemed like they had powers that I just could never harness. I was just busy. I didn't really see myself in that realm at all. And I wasn't, it was just getting started, really. But Ashley was very generous, and she invited me to cook in Louisville. It was the first time I think I left the state with stuff. And I got invited to do like farm to fork and some local things. But the first time that I got on a plane with food was to cook at Southern Foodways. It was like an auction item. And it was a dinner at the 21C in Louisville with Ashley Christensen, Annie Quattrano, Gabriella Hamilton, Lisa Donovan. Natalie Channon was doing like the tablescape snacks, like bread and beautiful tablescapes. And
Natalie from Project Alabama.
Yes. Yeah. Who's not a chef by trade, but just can do anything. A wondrous human.
That's a bunch of all-stars.
Oh my God. I mean, can you imagine the terror? Like, I look back and like I packed stuff in hotel pans because I didn't know what I was walking into. And I was like, oh my God, you dummy. But, I made some braised lamb and put some pomegranate seeds on it. It's a theme, right? But I remember seeing like Gabrielle Hamilton and her chef wife, Ashley. I opened the elevator and there they were. And I was like, oh my God, it's like freaking Iggy Pop and David Bowie right here. It was just incredible. But she actually forced me to do these things that were so out of my comfort zone. But I ended up learning so much. I mean, just that one trip, I learned so much. I met Lisa, who's like my best friend now, and I found my people and I learned so much. And I would come back and that would influence the little tricks. And then I was like, oh, that's how you do a restaurant. It's not about starting from scratch each time. You start building, and it clicked. It really started to click sometime in like 14, 15. And the food was good. I paid very close attention. I was maybe a hawk about it, but people like good food.
People do like good food. You close Garland. Ajja opens
June of 2023.
Wow. So it's still new.
Still new, yeah.
You hit your 1 year anniversary. You're
Coming
up on two.
Coming up on two, yeah.
How was that different from Garland, the opening?
180. I mean, Garland, like literally like who, what, no, why, But Ajja, I underestimated how popular it was going to be out the gate. That was kind of scary in a different way. We're still the same people. We're still kind of DIY, flying by the seat of our pants, and a lot of curveballs got thrown our way on the lead up. And the kitchen is really small. It was like all the opposite issues. Like Martin Street was giant, and this is 1,800 square foot building that includes the kitchen. The line is tight. The prep space is like non-existent. But I knew kind of like I had the structure for the menu, and I really wanted that thing to be modular. I wanted the whole concept is modular. There's the front, there's the middle, there's the outside, there's the lawn. We can do all the things that we were doing with a music venue and a bar and a restaurant in this tiny space. And the menu has sections so you can pull things out. At Garland, if you pulled, it was like a house of cards. You pulled one thing off the menu, the whole thing had to be rewritten because, you just can't have too many coconut dishes. But this is modular. So you can change one dip and it's not a big deal. And you can change one thing on the market menu, no big deal. Supposedly, it's, of course, still kind of contingent on each other. But yeah, it was very intentional. So many things that we talked about. And we had a great management team from the get-go. And we planned details. We really were thoughtful about how casual it is and how many steps of service are we going to have? What's the service going to look like? And we still changed it. But being respectful for the kind of table that we wanted in terms of how do you eat this kind of food? It's not about having one dish in front of you. It's a convivial experience.
So funny you said convivial, because that's the word I had in my brain.
Oh, good.
It is such a convivial space.
Yeah.
Like even upon arrival, the murals outside, everything, it just really sets this tone before you even step in the front
you
door.
enter in the back, which there's no real good reason for it. I mean, there is for us because we know what happened, but but it's a restaurant speakeasy in that sense. But we really wanted people to go out back there and see what the space really has to offer. And we want people to look at what are they having over there and like make
You
it.
walk in relaxed, and that's not always the experience.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Should be at every
Right,
restaurant,
right.
but it's not.
Yeah. I think we, put those signs like, keep going, keep going. Your guard gets down because you're like waiting for the next thing. And I think there's something great about the unexpected that changes your brain, right? It's like makes you more creative or open when you don't know what to expect. But when you walk into like a restaurant, a hotel, it's beautiful and the light fixtures are incredible and expensive and shiny. That's great too. I love that experience, but that's just not what this building is. So we really tried to listen to what the space wanted, and it could have been Vietnamese food or something, but whatever it was not going to be stiff. It's a fun place and the food had to be fun.
Tell us about the name.
Ajja. Ajja means come over in Hindi and Urdu. I know it has other meanings in Arabic. It's a word that every mom says who speaks Hindi when dinner's ready. Ajja, Ajja, khalo. And it's spelled A-A-J-A in Hindi, but the two J's like just look better. It happened, I was trying to find a name and had insomnia before Ajja opened or when we were still planning it and just trying to figure out what it's going to be. Doom scrolling, and I just ended up on this story about this song from the 80s that I remember as a kid called Jimmy Ajja from a Bollywood movie called Disco Dancer. And I love this song. And MIA did a cover of it in like 2000 or whatever. And it had gone viral. It was 2022 and COVID was still a thing and the lockdowns were so intense. And apparently somebody made a TikTok using that song. It was like phonetically, Jimmy Ajja apparently sounds like gimme rice. And so I was like, oh my God, Ajja is such a great word. Anyway, but it had this food connection at that moment. You get a little loopy when you're insomniated, but it just kind of stuck. Yeah.
And there's a bit of a travel motif running through the menu, some of the marketing materials.
Yeah,
What's
airplanes and, Paul's really into like vintage airplane ads and like the Persian Airlines, like all of the, even now, like Qatar Airlines and Emirates air travel, the kind of like glamour of that era travel, the airplanes became a theme. And Ajja is also, it's an invitation, right? So an invite to be transported. And we like that.
So, Cheetie, you have so many interests, and I know there are so many things you still want to do. And I think the last time I was in town, we met and had coffee at Heirloom. We were talking about a cookbook.
Yeah.
And I mean, you obviously have a memoir in you, you have a cookbook in you. Do you think you'll do those projects one day?
I really want to. I need a structure. I know we talked about one concept, and I've definitely been thinking about it, but I think this is my year to finally write the proposal that I was due like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. I don't know. But yeah.
What is time?
I know. What
meaningless
is
today.
time? Yeah. I'd like to make a record and I'd like to write a book. Those are my next.
Oh, mate, you're going to do another record. Very cool. Are you playing live much?
Not playing live, but our gear is set up. I got Logic on my computer and I'm really itching to go. There's like little things that happen. I don't know. I'm just ready.
So would this be a Birds of Avalon project or something?
I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe both. I don't know. It's hard. The reason I think with Birds of Avalon, there's 6 of us, 6 adults, schedules.
That's tough.
People have kids and their own businesses and jobs and whatnot. So I think I like making music on my own too. Like I've done a lot, even with Birds of Avalon. Like there were so many things that I finished in the studio by myself, and I like that. I like the freneticness of punching guitars, and only engineers will know what that means, but I like it. It's
Will you sing this time?
Yeah, I've been singing since like 2013 or 14. I started singing more, or a lot, I guess. So.
And we didn't even speak about the Independent Restaurant Coalition. So
Oh
we have
my
to talk
gosh,
about
yes,
that for a
we
few
do.
minutes because you have a new role with that organization.
Yeah, I've been on the board for 2 or 3 years, and I just became VP. I'm very excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Tell us what the Independent Restaurant Coalition is.
The Independent Restaurant Coalition, aka the IRC, was formed like March 20th, 2020, obviously from the pandemic. Ended up being a nationwide coalition of restaurateurs and chefs advocating for the independent restaurant community. I've always known that there isn't an organization that advocates for the betterment of this aspect of the industry. There's another organization that does represent restaurants, but they include Denny's and Chili's, and it's
Chains,
very, very different. There's a lot of overlap, but for sure there's a lot of things that we need and we believe in that are very different from places that answer to boards, and a lot of us are single shop owners or 2 or 3. The focus for the first 2 years was, a grant program for getting people out of the tremendous hole that was created by the pandemic. And that was the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, which did get passed. And astonishing to do that in 2 years. I think it saved a lot of people, myself included. But now focus is on all of the other things that we're always absorbing on our bottom lines and our top lines, things like credit card processing fees and immigration and labor laws. I mean, the no tax on tips or tax on service charges and all of those things that don't sound super sexy when you talk about them, but they're just really important. So we're a DC-based organization. We're nonpartisan, and we work directly with lawmakers to not just talk about what we need, but really try to have influence on policy. So,
was policy always a passion of yours?
Well, it was not always a passion. I did the James Beard boot camp program in 2018, and I learned so much, but I was like, I'm not going to talk to senators. I'm not that guy. I don't look like somebody who's going to, Tillis is not going to talk to me. But when the pandemic happened, it was like, are you kidding me? Like, all the taxes that we've paid, restaurants have put so much tax revenue into this community, and we have nothing, and nobody will support us, and nobody will acknowledge. And, if I had a dime for every time somebody said, well, we're not here to support any faction of small businesses. Well, look at the revenue. You're here for that, right? But not to help us. So I got mad. And then, it's like, well, the math doesn't explain itself. You have to tell people, and you can't just say the lawmakers have to be there for you. It's our responsibility to advocate for ourselves. And so that's what I'm doing. And I really do love it. I think it makes me feel a little less helpless.
There's a lot of chaos
in
government right now.
Yes.
How is that impacting IRC?
Well, it's, just started. I'm going up to DC. I think we're all on edge. There are, everything from ICE raid preparation and taxation on tips and the supply chain being massively threatened. I don't really know how we're going to navigate it, but I know we're not going to just sit on our hands. And I know that we are in a good position to, we haven't alienated anybody. And I think all we can do is try. And I don't know if reason is going to have any power in this climate, but it remains to be seen. But I do feel that independent restaurants are so tough anyway. It's a pretty fragile network, and I would hate to see another existential crisis in our community. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for the work you're doing on behalf of everyone.
Let's see if it works.
Okay, let's do a quick speed round. You have great taste in music and TV and culture in general. What are you and Paul streaming right now?
We have been watching iconic fashion designer biographies. So we just watched Cristobal, the story of Balenciaga. We watched The New Look, which I thought was going to be this very lighthearted, eye candy story of Christian Dior. Whoa, very heavy.
Yep. Nazis,
amazing. Nazis.
Yeah.
Oh, brutal. And we just watched Audrey Tautou in The Story of Coco Chanel. Those are our latest fixations.
What beverage do you start the day with?
Oh, black tea with milk. Oat milk now. Ugh.
I like oat milk.
Yeah, it's fine.
Do you make your own?
No.
I tried to make it once.
It's
a
slimy.
disgusting mess.
Yeah, I've made hemp milk, but
Bless the oat milk makers out there
right,
for giving us a
right.
decent product.
I know.
Dream travel destination?
Oh, right now, Vietnam, Malaysia, I'll take anything in that region of the world.
Mm-hmm. Last question. If you had to be trapped on a desert island with one food celebrity, who would it be and why?
Oh, a food celebrity. I guess Mother Joffrey, because she reminds me of my mom.
I love her so much.
Yeah, and I just like her whole aura.
I owe her a note. Mother, if you're listening, we're always thinking about you.
Yes, thank you for everything, Mother.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you too. It was so good to see you.
So good to see you.
And we get to see you tonight again at our open table Sit With Us dinner.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, Tamasha. That's going to be a lot of fun.
That's it for today's show. I would love for you to subscribe to Radio Cherry Bomb on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave a rating and a review.
Anyone you want to hear on an upcoming episode? Let me know. Our theme song is by the band Tra La La. Our producers are Taka Zen, Catherine Baker, and Jenna Sadu, and our editorial coordinator is Sophie Kais. Thanks for listening, everybody. You're the bomb.